Another episode of Sales Chatter, and today is Data Wednesday. What are the markets telling us? And most importantly, how can you, the professional sales rep, take the data Dean's going to deliver today and turn it into your next awesome sales sequence?
Yep.
Welcome to the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly. Have you guys ever had all of a sudden, like, all these bells and whistles start going off on your computer?
Yes.
Literally, as I'm hitting the intro, I don't know what's happened here. All these things have gone reverse. I'm hitting the intro. My screen just increased about 10 times the size. I don't, DJ, I don't know if you noticed, but you went off air for a second.
I was frozen.
I know there was all these things happening. My email's going ding, text messages are going ding. I'm like, oh my Lord, what is happening? It's an overload of data, which we're going to get today. So here's the big announcement for today, and we cannot be more excited. So as of today, Dean will be here every Wednesday to give us market updates. What's the data telling us? How can we take that data and turn it into helping us, the professional sales rep, keep our customers ahead of what's happening? I mean, Dean, for you to be here every Wednesday, for those of you who don't know Dean, you got to connect with Dean. He's a principal analyst at DAT.IQ. Dean is the man when it comes to what's happening in the market. And to have that addition to this show is insane value for everyone watching. So, Dean, thanks for being here, brother.
Yes,
DJ and I have been talking about it all
pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
So,
yeah, great to be with you.
I know you got a story and you got some pretty serious things to share about what the heck's going on in January, which is going to determine a lot for the year.
Yeah, I was like you. I was preparing last night, and I do some of my best best thinking when I'm dreaming and sleeping. So I woke up this morning thinking, in the early '80s, I used to do a similar thing, but it was called Salesman with a Purpose, SWAP. And when I was selling insurance in the early '80s in Sydney, Australia, I would go to a weekly meeting of sales guys, and we'd go to a hotel and we'd have a breakfast. And but we used to do this crazy thing where we'd all stand up and we'd sort of go, "I'm alive, I'm well, I feel great."
Ed Foreman. Ed Foreman used to say that. I'm alive, I'm alert,
yes,
and I feel great.
Yes, I've seen it just like that.
So it was really uncomfortable for an introvert like me. But what it did is it kind of got you out of your comfort zone and got you sort of breaking that malaise you get into in the morning where you're trying to get fired up, and it kind of got you hit the streets running, like full of energy, and it kind of carried week to week because you had a network to connect with and you could talk to. It's a bit like what you're doing on the show here, right? We're connecting with all the different folks in sales across the country, but you're doing it daily, which I think is fascinating. I think that's a really good move.
Yeah, we the mission with daily, and for all you sales reps out there watching, it's to wake up, let's get motivated, let's get a different perspective, and let's really start the day on a high note. I've been a huge believer of when we wake up in the morning, if our RPMs are like redlining, and throughout the day we kind of, people tear away at our RPM. If we can end the day at mid RPM or 3/4 RPM because we have it like just cracking in the morning, you know what? Then we're golden. It's when we wake up and we're kind of half, 3/4 RPM. We walk in, we got our, if anyone from Monster's listening, we still want another sponsor. So, you're kind of, you're dragging your feet, and it's the end of the day. You feel like you went, 4 rounds with Mike Tyson in his prime. And, our question became when DJ and I started really looking at this and saying, okay, we got to make a commitment to go daily. We were doing 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it was so much fun. And here's the thing, Dean, and you know it as well. When you do things like this, it's just as much for us as it is for everyone else. And, you call a spade a spade. When I was speaking on stage, when you do presentations, when you help train people, it's just as much for us. And it's not the accolades or the credit. It's when you help people understand things and when you help walk through scenarios, it resonates and it kind of solidifies in us. And so these shows, every morning we hang up and DJ, well, last week, because we stayed on for a good 45 minutes after we went off air, like we are over jazzed.
Oh, yeah.
And we've had so many people say, oh my gosh, like people are saying I stumbled upon it. People are saying this is part of my routine. It's part of my morning, like just amp to get going.
Right.
And that is everything, because if we can help give a sales rep a different perspective, like what you're about to bring to us today, a different understanding, they can go back and make their sales calls that are informative, that deal with relationship. And throughout, because it was literally DJ and I just said, okay, let's go 5 days a week. And it was just like, we'll just talk sales. Now we're coming up with formulas like Data Wednesday. We've got Mayhem Monday. We're going to bring customers in every Tuesday. We're going to have a different customer on. And if we can bring 5 different perspectives throughout the week, everyone we're going to hit on a different day. Right. So, I mean, I'm jazzed about today. Like I'm cranky, you can probably tell. And it's literally, I've had 4 sips of this. It's not like right. So it's, I mean, I might have had a couple of coffees, but like, so do you tell us what is going on?
What is going on?
Right.
I don't want to give away the
no, that's okay. I did a recording. I'm on Landline now tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern on Sirius XM 146, and it was the interviewer asked me. He said, "Do you think this is a trend? Like, as in rates are going to keep going up?" And I said, "It feels like it, because I've never seen anything like what's driving the market right now. Because you've got Omicron-driven absenteeism." You've got a supply chain disruption. You've got drivers are being held up on docks longer. We've got the sunset of the 3G network starts in 30 days. So the big network that's going to drop out is AT&T on February 22nd. So I think for anyone out there, this is an interesting data point, probably unrelated to DAT, but anybody that's got carriers they're working with that use ELDs, they're going to need to swap out their 3G device if their old ELD is on 3G. I mean, all Tesla cars that have been sold in a certain time frame have to be replaced. But I think what it'll, so anybody that's out there that's in the freight network that's got capacity, make sure their carriers are aware that the 3G network is upon us. The FMCSA is only giving them 8 days to rectify it, so they'll be out of coverage as soon as the sunset happens when the network drops. They'll have 8 days to rectify that. And unlike all telematics devices these days, which are over-the-air upgrades, this one you have to physically touch the truck, which means you're off the road for a day.
So now off the road for a day, plus all the backup. So like with this, with this one thing, I see a lot of things happening. Half the mechanics because of Omicron, so people are calling in sick. A lot of the weather, the storms we've been having lately, I mean, insane things are shutting down.
3 weeks of weather.
Yeah, and then you've got excuse me for my ignorance, but are the new 5G ones, are they all available, or like is there shortages with transistors and stuff for those as well?
I think there could be, but you go back to the ELD mandate in 17, early 18, the hard mandate came in April 18. All of those, most of those devices would have been on at least 4G by then. So, but there were still some 3G ones from the older days. In the ELD mandate brought about another 1 million devices onto the market. So I think that's an important one. But we've had 3 weeks of really bad weather, Dan. You bring a great point. And let me just finish the 3G point, because
go for it.
Warehouse sensors, if you're backing onto a cold store dock, right, those warehouse temperature sensors could be running on 3G. So you're going to see this is like almost like a Y2K sort of under the covers. This one could be very interesting to watch. I don't know how many carriers will be affected, but I think a lot of people outside of the truck that are sort of in those support service industries could be affected without really knowing it. So just back to the weather, we had Winter Storm Izzy come through. 11 states had double-digit snowfalls. We had 4 tornadoes touch down in Florida. It unprecedented. They didn't do this in days gone by when all the drivers on the road were super experienced, and they shut down. PennDOT, Pennsylvania DAT, shut down I-80, 70, and 90 Sunday noon before the storm came through, because they were worried about drivers getting into trouble. And a lot of inexperienced drivers do get into trouble, unfortunately. But it shut down the network, so a lot of those Monday deliveries are pushed out till Tuesday, even Wednesday. So that'll ripple through the freight network this week. So that's the third week in a row we've had major storms disrupt freight networks, right from Washington State I-90 right through the Midwest, down into the Mid-South, Mid-Atlantic, up into the Northeast. The polar vortex did the same thing to the freight market in February last year. Freight rates never came back down after that. It feels like that's happening again, but not just because of weather, but because of everything else that's going on. Because now you've got 8% of the workforce out of work on the West Coast because of COVID absenteeism policy. Not that they're sick necessarily, but they have to be out with a positive case. So you've already got 106 ships waiting, 1.2 million containers still sitting, trying to get unloaded. And now you've got 8% of your workforce is off. So that's going to create more supply chain disruptions going through. So it's like all of these things are sort of happening at the same time. And it's going to take us quite a while to work our way through this. And that's why I think spot rates did something last week they haven't done since January of 2018. It's the first time in the month of January since then they increased. Because as you know, capacity generally eases off in January and spot rates drop, contract rates kind of stay level. But rates jumped 7 cents a mile last week, right, in the middle of January. The last time they did that was this time in 18, they jumped 3 cents a mile. But of course, if you remember 2018, this was just the start of the freight market bull rally that lasted well into the latter part of the year. So I haven't seen that sort of movement. We're still seeing, I just noticed today that the EIA released their fuel price for the week, the average retail price at $3.73, I think it was. And I just did some quick analytics this morning. Fuel as a percentage of revenue is still about 23%. So even though diesel's up 7 cents this week, a lot of people will be having heartburn over that. The important thing to remember is that even though diesel's gone up, spot rates have gone up, which drives your top line revenue more than your cost increases because diesel goes up. So as a percentage of revenue, diesel's still about 23%. Now, for context, when all the bankruptcies were happening in 2019, it was 29%. So there's a direct relationship, right? Yeah. So I track. So I focus on the spot rate and the diesel price sort of individually, but it's the relationship between the two that asset-based carriers have to watch because that's where your margins are, right? And long-term profitability, if you talk to all the experts in the financial world, they'll tell you that 25% is about where you need to keep fuel as a percentage of your trip revenue. And you could do that in a truck stop while you're talking to your brokers on your load board, through your load board negotiations. You can figure out roughly what your percentage is. Now, some loads will be more, some will be less, depending on it's a light load, heavy load, mountains, headwind, all that sort of stuff. But if you keep the long-term average about 25%, then you're in pretty good shape. Right now, we're just under that. So, but I think for everybody sort of listening, one of the things you've got to watch is when spot rates start to come down and that percentage of revenue, diesel as a percentage of revenue, starts to climb. Because what comes out the back end of that is the bankruptcies. And the reason's very simple. In the spot market in particular, because a lot of carriers in the spot market don't get the fuel surcharge. It's an all-in rate.
That actually brings a very valid point for what DJ and I talked about on Monday. On Monday, on Mayhem Monday, we actually picked the topic reverse engineered logistics.
Right.
And what you just said actually equates back to that. So for any of you watching or listening, go back to the podcast from Monday. Reverse engineered logistics is start with your suppliers, start with the carriers that you want to work with and work backwards. And that is a very good reason for that as well, because if fuel becomes 29, 30, 35% of your overall profit and you're not getting it in the spot market, I mean, that's huge. I mean, so I got another question for you, Dean. I know, and for those of you that are watching, listening, and aren't a part of Inception, Dean is a regular guest on Inception. And when we were talking, what was it, probably 8-9 months ago, you talked about shifts in shipping patterns, and there was no real Christmas rush anymore. Do you see this continuation of max volumes of freight in January as another shift in purchasing habits and supply habits and inbound habits, or is this? Do you think this is like an anomaly?
I don't think it's an anomaly. I think this is part of that longer term trend towards, e-commerce in particular, which has changed length of haul and positioning of warehouses closer to populations. That's here to stay. But I think, what Omicron has done even though it looks like it's sort of a quick one, I don't know that it's the last variant that we'll see. It
Probably
feels
not.
like we're heading closer towards, an endemic situation where it becomes just part of life. But it feels like this will continue, I think, for the next 6 months, because if you look at how long it takes for markets to recover from things like this, we still don't have enough data to say it's done. Like, we can call it and say it's done, let's go back to normal. It'll be a very gradual tapering off that's going to take us well into the summer before we start to see anything come back to normal. And why I say that, spot market load post volumes are up 80% this week compared to the same week last year. 80%. So why is there
just
suddenly
people looking for extra capacity, or is that people
Yeah.
trying to save money?
any capacity? It's like any capacity that you can get a load moved, even a part load, Dan. So when we talked to Shippers Talk last week about, I think we covered on the show, inflated demand, where it appears there's higher demand for truckload capacity, but because trucks are sitting longer on docks, lower staffed warehouses,
Yeah.
it appears we've got a capacity shortage. It's just the capacity is not moving through the networks fast enough. And that's creating this. What's also driving the inflated demand is a lot of loads have to move as soon as something's ready, because there's another part of the supply chain waiting on those goods. So you're seeing a lot more urgency in the spot market, a lot more loads going out that might have waited a little bit longer to be full. They're sending them. And I think that, so if you put all this together, you can see that you've got a lot of Christmas inventory that's still sitting on ships offshore that didn't make it in time. That they're fighting for warehouse space. A lot of freight is moving from warehouse to warehouse to warehouse to find a home because it hasn't been sold. We're starting to see that pattern start to emerge again. So there's just lots of things going on in the spot market. And I think whenever we've got that disruption and turmoil, we're going to see this continue like this, I think, for the foreseeable future. Now, a data point I would like to share is we looked at all of our loads moved last year, because there's been a lot of misleading information in the market about how high our freight volumes are year over year. And admittedly, some commodities are pumping out a lot more volume, year over year, things that we need, as opposed to things we don't need. Our total loads moved within the DAT freight network, which is, remember, it's about 120 billion in freight spend. So it's about a third of the truckload market. Total loads moved were flat from 2021 to 2020 to 2021. Right. So over the last 2 years, the number of loads moved didn't change. Right. What changed last year, though, was the number of loads on the contract market dropped 12%. The number of loads moved on the spot market increased 12%. So there was a shift. There was almost a doubling of the volume moved in the spot market. And normally in good times, normal times, the amount of volume moved in spot is around, it's like a 90-10 split, maybe 85-15 between contract spot. It's up around 25% of volume is moving on the spot market now because of all the factors we just spoke about. Big carriers can't get enough trucks out of factories. They can't increase capacity if they wanted to. Can't find enough drivers. Drivers are finding better jobs shorter to home, so long-haul truckload capacity is tight. So they can't add capacity even if they wanted. And of course, what that's moving is if they're still rejecting around 25% of their loads every day that they get through the TMS system, right, from the shippers, if they're still rejecting around a quarter of those and only accepting like three quarters, that volume's going to the spot market. It drops down through the routing guides and goes out at a higher rate. So lots of things happening right now that's driving this spot market, and I think we'll see this well into the summer before. I think the catalyst is we've got to see some signs that the pandemic's reaching its conclusion, but we're a ways from that yet.
Well, so a couple of things that go on through my head is, there was an article, and I have a lot of friends in construction, and one of the things that they said is something that most people don't think about is,
Right.
more of country homes that are on septics.
Right.
The gentleman that one of my buddies, he's an excavator, his main business is septics. He goes, Dan,
Right.
I can't keep up. He goes,
Yeah.
like 3 years ago,
Right.
I would do a septic a week kind of thing. And I mean,
Right.
in my town, we're 15,000 people in the town that I live in,
Right.
and surrounding towns. He goes, I'm doing 10 a week now. And I said, why?
Wow.
He goes, because people are home, people are working from home, and they're overloading their old septics.
Right.
So if you look at what goes into a septic, right? So all the materials, all the construction. He goes, so it's not just consumer goods, it's everything that's happening. Another buddy of mine does chimneys and that kind of stuff. He says, you wouldn't believe how many chimneys are collapsing because people are home all day now. It's wintertime. They're having fires all day long.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden their chimneys are collapsing. The bricks are breaking.
Wow.
Like there's so many different things that we're not putting. We're not. Most people aren't putting into the equation. Like there's e-commerce, but then there's also that side of it. Yep. Where, you could load a skid of septic tiles. It doesn't necessarily have to be on a flatbed. It could use a dry van. So people are actually starting to make the switches from, okay, well, let's get creative. And, hey, that's okay. We would normally load 24 pallets. It's too heavy. So we'll book 3/4 of a truck and do this. But the two trucks will equal this, and they're delivering to job sites. And they're actually, pump trucking it to the back and then taking it off with forklifts and stuff. Yeah. So there's all these different variables that as a sales rep, if we're just kind of coming in, sitting down and making sales calls, we don't consider, right? And then my question for you is, so when a storm hits, right? So, just even talk about the polar vortex that we had last year, right? How long did that ripple effect take to fix?
It took probably, I'm going to say, before capacity came back to the market, it was 3 weeks before capacity side started to stabilize. But the disruption on the supply, on the demand side with shippers, lasted months and months. I don't know that we've ever recovered. I still can't get oil for my truck because of the chemical factory shutdowns back in February last year. A year later.
So we look at that and we say one storm that I think that the ice melted in a week and a half, maybe a week and a half. So a week and a half is like 9 months worth of pain and aggravation and or a year's worth of pain, aggravation and headache. How long do we really think? So then let's look at this, right? So you've got people retooling, you got people going back into different works, you got people that are saying, you know what, I'm done. I'm retiring. I'm done with this crap. I have friends that are truck drivers, been truck drivers forever. Their deal was they're going to retire in 5 years. 90% of them now are like, I'm working local. I don't care. I'll take the cut in money. I'm home every night. I'm not dealing with this crap. And a couple of them had said, the inexperienced drivers out there are just driving me nuts. There was a post on LinkedIn the other day where, and both of them are at fault because one driver's going, look at this. We're on a 1-lane highway, 1 lane each way. And he's filming this truck that comes out.
Oh my gosh, I've seen
Did
that.
you see that? It goes right past him. And literally like two cars go onto the shoulder.
Cars had to ride off the road.
He's like, I'm just done with this crap. I'm not willing to deal with it. And then I look at that. I look at what's happening with companies bringing way more product in because they don't want to be short and they don't want to miss, spring editions and this kind of stuff. And, we had Greg from Flair on. He's like, listen, I got 1.6 million square feet of warehouse space I didn't have 2 years ago. So we got all these things happening. And the big question is and I know everybody's asking it, but is 6 months realistic? I don't know. I say to myself, guys, prepare for this till the end of 2023.
So.
And if
until we start to see some kind of clearing, we just have to expect this is going to continue, I think.
But again, if we listen to what Dean has said, there's 2 million TEU coming in annually, more than our ports can handle. That's 5,800 containers a day. And trucks, trailers, they can't produce them fast enough to keep you look at all the instability and it's like, holy crap, what's going on here?
Well, and I'll tell you about, even so, Dean, you talked about the ELDs, and I'm glad you brought that up. But I seen a report last night even about the airports are really fighting against the bigs, the AT&T and Verizon for switching 5G. To 5G.
I saw that,
because of what it does, or what it's doing to some of the airline equipment. And it's not the phones itself, it's the towers. They've been pushing, and it's been a battle, I guess. I didn't even know this until seeing the report last night, but been a battle, I guess, between the airports and the bigs for the cell pushing 5G, and they've pushed it off. But now I guess they're going no matter what. They're just going to stay, at least according to the report. They're going to limit what they turn on near the airports. But
Yeah, that's a new one. It's like I call 2021 the domino economy, where things kept falling one after the other, and they totally unrelated things, right? This is like, so we've had 3 weeks of storms, we've had weather in areas you don't normally see it, where they're totally unprepared for ice and snow. And it's the severity of storms that's changing, not so much the frequency, but you're seeing much more severity in areas you wouldn't have normally thought about. And it's just creating this ripple effect through the market. And I think that the 5G thing is another one that'll happen. Dan, I think we could see the supply chain, especially on the import side. Exports have suffered, of course, because the lack of availability of equipment. But in the truckload sector, we could certainly see this go all year. I don't know that there's any change there, because we've taken so much market share from the intermodal railroad side of the industry. A lot of shippers use intermodal as a low-cost alternative. You delay freight on ships, you lose that intermodal window. But the railroads haven't got a lot of capacity to add more rails or more equipment, right? And nor do they have a lot of interest, because it's more about their shareholder profitability that they tend to focus on. So we've picked up, because trucks can go anywhere and rails are kind of limited to their network and terminals, trucks can go anywhere at any time. And we've picked up a lot of that market share that's overflowed from the intermodal network. I think that's going to continue on all year, because if you think about the number of ships, they still can't push through any more than 30 ships alongside the berth at any one time. There's 106 sitting there waiting in the queue to get in. It's triple. So for context, in June, it was like 33 ships waiting to get unloaded. Today, it's 106. So it's triple the volume in 6 months, but the number of ships at berth is flatlined at 30. It's going to take a long time to clear that network, that volume, because a lot of those containers come inland on the intermodal network to Chicago and Kansas City and Memphis, and then get distributed out. That's still a big choke point for the supply chain. So it could last all year. That's why we think that the spot market for truckload carriers will remain pretty active. And that's something you've got to talk to your capacity providers about, right? Is the rising diesel prices. You've now got, of course, the cross-border deal going on with the vaccine mandates, right? Southbound, northbound. So another wrinkle to think about.
Well, and if we look at just some of the data that you shared with us last time, 40% are unvaccinated. How many of those unvaccinated are willing to get vaccinated in order to make that trip? And I mean, as a sales rep, if you're listening and watching, there's some pretty serious data points that Dean shared. The cost on the spot market going up, the cost of fuel going up, year over year, volumes haven't increased at all, but the costs are rising. These are all serious conversations with your prospects, with your customers right now. To talk dedicated business, reverse engineer all of it and dedicate it to suppliers. I mean, listen, if fuel goes up, and just that one data point alone, with fuel being 25% of the revenue, and when it goes up to 29%, that one piece alone would make everybody want to say, okay, listen, I really want to stay out of the spot market. I want to get some sustenance. I want to get some stability in my supply chain, both for a customer and an asset-based carrier.
Right.
And as the middleman in logistics, that's gold on both sides, because you can help a customer achieve a goal, you can build relationships, and you can make it happen. And just these data points alone, if you're watching this, wait till it's over, rewatch it, because what Dean shared there is the conversation to have now.
Absolutely.
With your customers.
If you don't, Dan, that capacity will disappear.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Because somebody else will make the deal.
Yeah. Right? The inclination is to try and maximize your margin as much as you can. So the problem is, if you drive the carrier's margin down and the price down, eventually he's going to go out of business if fuel costs go up. So if you want to keep capacity, there is a price, and that's part of that discussion point with the shippers.
And fuel's going up.
Absolutely.
Huge. Like, fuel's rising. I mean, it's especially for us here, like in Ontario, fuel is absolutely insane. Like, I filled 2 jerry cans yesterday. It was like $100. I'm like, and I mean, it was premium, but still, it's insane. Nigel says
it was in 2014. Yeah, I see that from the UK.
I'm never going to listen to sales, to liken sales to a snowball again. It's easy to say within the UK. We seldom see this stuff. Be safe. And then Jeff says, "You're right, Dean." Yeah, 100%.
Folks from UK. I've been watching the Premiership rugby over there every weekend. I'm absolutely loving it.
Nigel will have something to say about that for sure. But so it's So those are the data points for today, everybody. I know we're just short on time. DJ has an awesome quote, Dean, and I know you guys are all going to love this. So
yeah,
go for it. Even you know what? Go on all of them. Go on all of them, DJ.
Okay, so we did talk about before about these quotes, Dean, and I knowing you're coming on and you're going to be on with us a lot. I figured we have to find a good quote for you. And so I found a couple. The first was, "You can't improve what you don't measure," which is obviously having to do with data. But the other one is, "The goal is to turn data into information and information into insight." But the one that we really wanted to end with, Dean, and this is for everybody watching. And again, thank you everybody for watching. Like us. If you're watching this on YouTube, like us and subscribe so you know when we're on live. We are Monday through Friday, 9 till 9:30. But the one for you, Dean: "In God we trust, all others must bring data."
Data, exactly.
I love it. Ryan says, so much gems in just 30 minutes. What am I going to do with the next 30? You know what you're going to do with the next 30, Ryan? You're going to take those gems and you're going to go to market and use those gems in the market, brother. That's what you're going to do. Thanks everybody for another edition. Dean will be back next Wednesday. And this is for the whole year. We booked Dean in for the year. Actually, before we go, guys, Nigel says there's some really great rugby being played in the Premier currently, a little different to what I played.
Yeah. I played rugby league most of my life, but I just love watching the rugby. It's awesome. Six Nations are coming up shortly too, even better.
There you go. Have a great day, everybody. Take that data, go to market, use it.
Yes. Okay. Talk to your customers.
See you guys next week.
You too, buddy.
Yes.